Psalty songs for little praisers.
No. Wait.
Hey!
Clever Conrad always gets...
Wait.
But each of you will have a chance to tell the audience the good news that God loves them.
This is gonna be the worst tour that Psalty and Charity have ever had.
Wait.
Oh boy. You know, Christian media in each decade has gone through a lot, especially to get to the point where we are now with books, movies, audio dramas, and so on. I'm speaking as far as quality goes. My point being that a lot of great Christian art has finally come to fruition with great stories, incredible presentation, and creators who really knew what they were doing behind the scenes to give us some of the most beautiful pieces in media. I say this now because back then this was not the case. If you know anything about current day Hollywood and media corporations, then this shouldn't be a shock to say that Hollywood is extremely secular and wants literally nothing to do with God or Christianity. Which is really sad considering it has been built upon through billions of dollars, and yet we can't even squeeze out a good story that reflects a single Christian moral, not to mention with a good budget and quality writing. Instead, they decide to invest their money into this slop. Now don't get me wrong, Hollywood has always been secular with shaky ethics since the beginning of the film industry. But you would see them take chances with projects, and Christian media and especially Christian movies in this era were sort of on the opposite spectrum. It feels like both categories switched places over 20 years at this point now, meaning that Christian/religious movies nowadays have drastically gone up in production, budget, and writing level, whereas Hollywood movies and the mass media have dwindled off in the presence of pop culture. The reason I bring all this up now is because I want to pave the landscape and context for what the main topic of this video is really about. Like I said, back then Christian media has suffered a lot in the past, but not exactly due to bad intentions or a heretical point of view on concrete theological topics. The main reason why so many projects fail to make an impact, with one obvious exception of course, is because, well, no one really knew how to make films. Okay, sure, you could tell that maybe a few people behind the scenes knew how to hold a camera or maybe took a class or two in film school. But the rest of the execution, though, it kinda speaks for itself. And I believe to this day that the direct-to-VHS series of Psalty the Singing Songbook is the epitome of this genre of low-quality Christian media. Psalty was truly one of the strangest executed TV shows I believe that has been put to film. Mainly because of the big blue songbook in the room, Psalty himself. But also the cast of characters alongside the extremely stilted acting from the kid cast members and so on. The uncanniness of it all, and very unsettling looking practical effects to bring the otherworldly characters to life. But before I go too far, let's rewind a little and shine a spotlight on the creators of the show and explain how this came to be. Psalty the Singing Songbook was created in 1979 by Ernie and Debbie Rotino, who were Christian musicians at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa in Southern California. They got married and started their music career together in the mid-70s and started to produce Christian music for young children, since there were not a lot of artists making that kind of music for that kind of demographic. It was basically an era where that kind of genre was not fully tapped into yet, since at this point of time this was bouncing off the big Christian revival that happened in the mid-70s regarding music and particularly the US, making not only Christian music but Christianity itself public and mainstream again. So the sandbox was pretty fresh and new at that point to start making a difference in the realm of Christian music, since before that all you had really was classic hymns and Southern gospel. Ernie and Debbie were determined to create something that kids would relate more with at their age. A colorful yet simplified version of what adults are hearing in church while still getting the same truth and message. So the task was set, and they made their first kids worship album. But what they found later was that their music album lacked a way to tie the songs together in a coherent beginning, middle, and end kind of way. Since kids, like everyone, identify with stories that bring the point of a message in a clear example, Ernie and Debbie realized that they needed a character to help kids understand worship and tie each song together like a bow. And after brainstorming, they decided on an old psalter, or songbook, character named Psalty. The character's main message was that true worship comes from the heart. Once the creators cracked the code, Ernie and Debbie began producing albums that combined songs with character, story, and a cast of children to help their audience identify with them. Now, after giving that synopsis, you might be thinking, Des, why is that so bad? Or why does that sound like it's low quality to you? And I want to respond to that by saying, I think Psalty the Singing Songbook for Little Praisers music is quite good. The message is great, the innocence, the charm is all very noticeable. Even the music production itself is fun to listen to at times. I mean, you can definitely tell this music was made in a specific time and era with all the piano synthesizers and the triangle dings. You don't even have to tell me when this was made, and I could have immediately told you 1979. What I'm referring to specifically when I talk about my criticism is the video series. And in reality, I have no real issue with the Psalty's VHS tapes, I just think they're quite dated and have not aged well, having bizarre execution, and overall I just think it's fun to poke at the weirdness and uncanniness of the show, including character costumes, character design, and weird over-the-top yet extremely stilted acting. But more on all that later. Anyway, the first debut album of the Kids Praise series was released and was a huge hit with its target audience, which gave the green light to go ahead and start producing more kids albums with a bunch of fun songs and big expressive characters. The creators made a big breakthrough with their music and reached millions of kids and families around the world. So at this point, Debbie and Ernie were wondering how they could expand their ministry once they saw the critical success. And what better way to expand the audible to the visual? It was time to bring Psalty to the screen. So Debbie and Ernie invested in the direct-to-VHS series by creating the same formula from their previous albums. Most episodes revolved around Psalty gathering kids around the neighborhood to come praise and tackle moral lessons from the Bible and how to apply them to their own lives, starring a cast of interesting characters, to say the least. And I want to say this again. This idea in concept is totally great. Even VeggieTales really banked on this kind of formula. But folks, this is where execution means everything. The whole idea of tying a selection of songs with interjected dialogue from cartoon characters who talk or sound a certain way works really well for a CD, since a lot of the fun voices are meant to get your imagination going and leave a lot more with interpretation to yourself. Even the box art characterizes Psalty and the other characters as full flat 2D cartoons, with big expressive eyes and over-the-top portion-shaped limbs. All of this works visually because it's simplified attributes, where your brain doesn't associate it with actual reality. So the mind can keep the design in its own world that it's intended to be and doesn't cross into the uncanny territory. That is, if you don't portray it in live action! Yeah, so this is kind of the main reason why I wanted to make this video. I thought it was important to highlight a lot of the great things the series has done, but I gotta talk about how strange some of these choices were when it came to constructing the show. Like, why does Psalty look like Ronald McDonald's rejected cousin who ate too many blueberries? The main character himself is supposed to have a fun, inviting look and appeal to him, so kids can feel like they can draw near to him. But I gotta admit, this might be the most dated aspect of the whole series because Psalty looks so weird in live action. And his interactions with a cast of kids make this look even more creepy just because of how off-putting not only the design is, but also his characteristics. Like, you can tell Barney the dinosaur was inspired by this kind of presentation. Seeing a giant deadpan purple dinosaur with non-expressive eyes talk to kids in a tender kind of way. The performance doesn't match the design. I think a more meta reason why this is also off-putting is because since Psalty, portrayed by Ernie Rotino himself, has to be covered in blue and white face paint to hide the fact that it's just a dude in a book costume. It gives off a creepy clown vibe. The way he caters to kids and tries to be fun and silly with a high squeaky voice really makes you think of a serial killer, especially with today's depiction of how clowns are portrayed in horror movies, which is not the vibe you want to give at all when you're supposed to be a kid's role model on screen. But that's just Psalty's character design. I'm sure none of the other characters are off-putting in the slightest.
Oh, I'm fine. I'm just reminding you what we're going to do today.
Okay, this just can't be me, right? This just can't be my opinion that all these characters look so creepy. It's literally the exact same feeling as if you're walking in an abandoned theme park or arcade. And then all of a sudden these 40-year-old rustic animatronics jump out and eat you alive. And I think the whole thing gets weirder when these characters are appealing to children. Again, I get the ambition and I appreciate what the intention was with the ministry. But why is this the way how the end product has to look? Remember when I said Lutfi is the scariest thing known to mankind? Well, he still is. But this is literally the same premise with just a creepy character design. Only in live action! Honestly, that little moldy pickle can just go join the rest of these cursed designs, because in my book, it looks like he would fit nicely in with this aesthetic. And I don't want to rub this next point in too much since it's not the biggest deal. But the kid actors on set really embody an artistic medium between extreme over-the-top acting and the most cement-faced stilted acting you will ever see from any child, ever. And then there's just the strange amount of trust and vulnerability these kids will just throw to Psalty. I'm not kidding when I say these kids are just so ecstatic about leaving their family's house only to dance and skip blindly to follow a blue man dressed as a 6-foot-tall book. I mean, wouldn't you be a little concerned if you were one of these kids' parents and you just see little Johnny running away from the house to greet this man in blue makeup? And then he tells little Johnny to come with him to his fun house? I don't know, man, this whole thing is just bizarre. And I don't know why so many families who just watched these videos back in the day just thought it was normal and cute. Maybe I'm just looking at this too hard from a modern day perspective, but I have to assume that some people back then thought this was a little weird too, right? Anyway, let's move on. In order to make this a somewhat thorough retrospective of Psalty's episodes, I'm gonna have to show you more of what this series has to offer. It's time to go down the Psalty rabbit hole. Debbie and Ernie eventually brought Psalty to the live stage along with the whole cast of characters. which performed immensely well with its audience, because of course it did. Who wouldn't want to see your worst nightmare depicted live on stage in front of you and not just on your small screen? But this was a huge critical success because, as you can see from the recordings, a lot of people went to see this production. I sure don't deny that the effort has always been put in with the costumes. It's just that I happen to find it disturbing in a way I really can't fully express no matter how many videos I make. Now that I think about it, this whole YouTube video series of me reviewing media from my childhood is more like one strange therapy session of how to work through my trauma as an adult. Anyway, I need to talk about the Psalty movie that was made. So in 1992, the last of the 9 Psalty VHS tapes were produced, which was titled Psalty's Salvation Celebration. This time with a noticeable, somewhat bigger budget than the other productions. Mainly because there was a bit more of an attempt to make this show cinematic with its camera shots, filming sets, and costumes. But like I said, this was the last video production of the Psalty Adventures to be put to film. This was, funny enough, supposed to be a 2-part adventure, but evidently the second half of the story never got made. Instead, the second half was created to be put back in the live show again, along with a CD tape. My prediction is because this show probably never made its money back from the production costs, so it would be cheaper to showcase the conclusion in a different format. But what's the content in this video that made this the last official Psalty project? Well, I'm not sure we'll find the answer, but let's take a look anyway. The story focuses on a girl named Shelly, and a band of kids who are on a gospel message tour, joined by Psalty himself. But a rising conflict emerges when Shelly gets tempted by the villainous Risky Rat to abandon her faith for fame. The show tries teaching kids about the importance of sharing their testimony and finding true value in God's love rather than worldly success. But call me crazy, I don't know if this show does the best job of that. I mean, its heart is really in the right place, but the execution is really bizarre. The show depicts sharing the gospel to non-believers is not easy and most of the time quite challenging. But the way how these scenes come off is super cheesy and really forced. It doesn't really know how to depict non-believers as regular people. It just feels like everyone is secretly an alien, and they are taking on the appearance of a human and trying to figure out how to use words that come out of their mouth, which in the end makes you as the viewer, or in this case, the child who is watching this, come away with a false conclusion of how to take these scenarios in real life. I'm not saying you need to have an explicit adult dialogue back and forth, but at least give the audience a more realistic depiction of how these conversations would actually go. I mean, what kid talks like this?
You're the very best one out there. Thanks, Ralph. But I don't understand the words to that song. What does it mean to be born again?
Shelley, it has always been my contention that Christian kids are, well, quite frankly, nerds.
Right.
The really strange thing about this episode is, well, a lot of stuff, but particularly the cliffhanger the show leaves us off with, which happens to be Psalty tied up over a boiling cauldron ready to be eaten alive by a bunch of 1990s native stereotypes. Sorry, I just had to check that I'm still watching Psalty. Yes, okay, that is actually what is happening right now. Okay, gotcha.
I can't do this, Sam.
Apparently, Psalty and his gang of kidnapped children, little appraisers, are on the search for their missing Psalty celebration tapes, stolen by the one and only Risky Rat. Who is Risky Rat, you say? Why does Psalty's new costume headpiece look like as if Thomas the Train got his face melted into some boiling blue acid inside a 7-foot-tall singing songbook, you say? Well, I don't know. But we actually have to talk about the new costume for Psalty, because what in the world is this? I think the idea and concept was to have Psalty's new design emulate the 2D cartoon design on the box, since there was more of a cartoon appeal to the character originally, but as you can see, it doesn't translate well to live action, due to the fact that the mechanisms controlling Psalty's mouth and eyes are very limited in their movement, which therefore gives off a broken animatronic or puppet vibe at an abandoned amusement park. Risky Rat is...
Oh, this is where you're hiding!
Whoa, wait, hey, who allowed this serial killer disguised as a human rat on board? Somebody call 911! Protect the kids! Anyway, he has the exact opposite issue of Psalty, but still leads to the same resolution of being terrifying, where Psalty has extremely limited expression and movement, while Risky Rat has the most over-the-top mannerisms, smiling at the camera, breaking the fourth wall, kind of reenacting a Jim Carrey performance. But where Jim Carrey's characters lean into some creepiness at times, he knows how to target his character's mannerisms into the behavior of whatever character he is playing, and then uses the weirdness of those character attributes to add to the overall charm of the performance. The guy who was playing Risky Rat was just told to look at the camera and then act borderline unhinged, and even seductive at points to the children-based audience. I understand he is supposed to be the over-the-top Saturday morning cartoon villain, but I think it's just way too much. I can just tell you that as soon as the show cuts to the dude in the train cart alone with him staring at the camera, you know that young child me was covering my eyes behind the couch since it felt like I was trapped in the room with this guy. Not to mention the prosthetics are super creepy in the exact same way why I can't stand Psalty in his makeup or smush Thomas the Train face seriously. I think anytime live action productions try to make human-like rats, it's always going to be disturbing no matter what because in live action you can't get away with cartoon attributes in a subtle way. And that's what's happening here with every single Psalty character. How are the kids not running for their lives? Where are the parents and the legal guardians of these children? And why have they entrusted their kids' lives to this demonic-looking blue cubed alien? I guess this would be a good transition to talk about the kid actors themselves. They are all, well, how should I put this? Lifeless robots. Part of me doesn't want to be too harsh because I know that they're just kids, and I'm sure they were trying and doing what they were told. But man, if the direction was just to act happy and loud, then I guess mission accomplished. Honestly, they are probably the one aspect of the show I don't have much of a critique with, since they are either extremely boring and bland, or really loud and over the top. You either get 1 or 10, and nothing in between. But that's low-budget child actors, I guess. It is definitely possible to pull off genuinely good performances when you're young, but it is rare and you have to understand the script well, and the director has to do a very good job on getting on the same level as the kid. But then again, I don't really expect that in 1992's Psalty Salvation Celebration directed VHS. Anyway, so this show just kind of repeats itself over and over again. Psalty and the kid sing songs, Shelly questions her loyalty to the talking book guy, and then the show concludes that it's a good idea to follow Jesus instead of the demon rat man, right before Psalty gets turned into book soup. And that's it, that's the movie. Yeah. So, to say the Psalty series as a whole aged poorly would be an understatement. Again, I want to make sure everyone understands the point I'm about to make. The whole conception and idea of Psalty I think is great in theory. Everything is in the execution. You can have great ideas and a solid script and fail at the presentation. And you can succeed with not the best script or even come up with a very basic idea and still make it work in the final product. But unfortunately, I think Psalty the singing song book was unable to crack that timeless spark that everyone wants to go back on when they are older. The only reason I see people going back to this Christian home video series is because of either the music or the ironic factor that the characters are so unhinged and bizarre. There's nothing really innovative about it that pushes the writing or the characters forward in a fun or entertaining way. It also just has the same mundane story rinsed and repeated. This is definitely a product of its time, and not in a good way. In my opinion, you're way better off listening to the CDs while sparing your children's eyes at the same time. Or just, go watch VeggieTales.